Number 5 on this list is the MLK tapes. Martin Luther King Jr. is best known for being a leader in a huge civil rights movement. He is remembered as a hero, but the FBI back in the day definitely didn't think about him as such. Grunge says, "You know Martin Luther King Jr. as a crusading civil rights activist and probably one of the greatest Americans who ever lived." That's pretty much the exact opposite of how the establishment saw him in the 1960s. King was regarded on Capitol Hill as little more than a communist agitator. So sure was J. Edgar Hoover that King was one of the bad guys, that he authorized illegal bugging and wiretapping of King, hence the infamous sex tape. In 1964, the FBI edited together a highlights reel of King's extramarital affairs and sent it to his wife, accompanied by a note urging King to kill himself. The Hollywood Reporter has the story. The tape is reported to have been a collage of King's infidelities, possibly spliced in with a likely fake clip of him propositioning a man. Although the tape has since vanished, the originals it was stitched together from haven't. Smithsonian reports that a 1977 court order means that their content will be unsealed and made public sometime in 2027. For me, what makes this tape so terrifying is the fact that the FBI made it. They literally thought that it was their duty to destroy those who were trying to fight for equality. The FBI are supposed to have our backs as citizens, and it shouldn't matter what color skin you are or what you believe in. Clearly, that did matter to the Bureau several decades ago though, which is just the worst thing to think about. Number 4 on this list is the most wanted list. Most of us are probably pretty familiar with the FBI's most wanted list. Usually it's filled with some of the worst criminals that the world has to offer, and they're typically tied to crimes involving murder or high-ranking positions in drug trafficking rings or even terrorist organizations. Either way, these individuals are usually considered some of the most dangerous people on the planet. However, that may not necessarily be true. This list, although it's certainly filled with some of the worst criminals in the world, shouldn't be looked at as the top 10 most dangerous people. The media and even the FBI kind of portray it that way, where the people shown on this list are the top 10 criminals in the world and they must be stopped, but it's very likely that there are far more dangerous criminals than them who are being withheld from this list. If you happen to be a criminal and you also happen to have individual features which are pretty bland and basic, then it's your lucky day, because it's very likely that the FBI won't be putting you on their list. This list isn't based off of the severity of your crimes, it's actually heavily influenced by the looks of the criminals. If a criminal has something unique about them, a tattoo is very prominent, maybe a scar that can't be missed, or just one of those faces that you could never mistake, then they'll probably make the list. Michael S. Schmidt, a New York Times reporter, says Bureau officials try to select dangerous fugitives who could be recognized by the public because they have distinctive physical features. So even though we think of this list as the most dangerous criminals, it's actually just the most dangerous criminals with a unique look. It's very possible that there are some other fugitives out there that just aren't unique looking enough, so we won't ever know about them. Number 3 on this list is the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper, as we know it, is an entity that you really don't want to run into. Therefore, anyone who through their brutalistic behavior has earned the nickname the Grim Reaper is also somebody who you probably don't want to run into. Mike Devlin writes, "Mafia nicknames are often less than intimidating, but Gregory Scarpa's savage nature earned him a pretty tough one. The Grim Reaper. Scarpa rose through the ranks of the Colombo crime family but was collared in 1962 for armed robbery. Realizing what a potential asset they had on their hands, the FBI offered him an informant deal and Scarpa accepted the job to keep himself out of jail. Over 3 decades, the mafioso had a tumultuous relationship with his FBI handlers. He was a brutal, tough man. Later in life, he would try to self-medicate a bullet wound to the eye by pouring scotch into it. Yeah, I know, insane. But the agency used that to their advantage. According to some sources, he was sent to Mississippi in 1964 to uncover the fate of 3 missing civil rights workers. The FBI gave him a gun and bribe money and sent him on his way. Unencumbered by the regulations which law enforcement agencies are forced to work under, he kidnapped a KKK member from the store where he worked. Scarpa viciously beat the man, then shoved a gun in his mouth until he revealed the location of the men's graves. So this move from the FBI really is not cool, guys. They literally got a convicted felon who, let's face it, has probably murdered people before, to go and do their job for them. They gave this convicted felon a gun and money to get it done, and then was okay with his methods for how he conducted his business. Morally speaking, this does not seem like an okay thing for this agency to do. Not only should George probably be behind bars, but giving somebody nicknamed the Grim Reaper a gun and sending them on their merry way probably isn't the safest thing to do either. This also isn't the only time the FBI has worked with questionable individuals and groups before, and it probably won't be the last. Number 2 on this list is Geronimo Pratt. This is truly a really sad story and a very bad look for the FBI. Geronimo Pratt was a decorated war vet who fought in Vietnam. Upon returning to America, he decided to study political science. During his studies, he fell in love with the group the Black Panthers and became deeply involved with them. For those who don't know, Google describes this party as a Marxist-Leninist Black Power political organization founded by college students Bobby Seale and Hugh P. Newton in October 1966 in Oakland, California. This group had a heavy focus on self-defense, and considering Pratt was a war vet, he was appointed the title of Minister of Defense very quickly. The FBI didn't like this very much and decided that it wasn't in their benefit to have Pratt in this position of power, so they decided to get rid of him. Mike Devlin says that the agency got their chance in 1968 when 2 black men robbed 27-year-old Caroline Oslin and her husband Kenneth on a tennis court in Santa Monica, California. When they failed to produce enough cash to satisfy the men, they were riddled with bullets. Kenneth Olson survived, but Caroline died 11 days later. Pratt was charged with the crime and subjected to a trial orchestrated by the FBI. The full scope of their influence is unknown, but the allegations run deep. Information was withheld from the jury, including the fact that Kenneth Olson, who identified Pratt as his wife's killer, had previously chosen another man. Even more damning, the FBI lost wiretap records that backed Pratt's alibi. Pratt ended up serving 27 years in prison until finally in 1997 his sentence was overturned because it was revealed that one of the witnesses that testified against him was an FBI informant. Pratt served 27 years in jail for a crime he most likely never committed, all because the FBI decided that they wanted him there. And finally, number 1 on this list is MOVE. MOVE was a cult-like group of black liberationalists who preached a return to nature. Centered in a Philadelphia row house, this commune had windows covered with plywood and rotting, vermin-infested compost piles in the backyard. Group members stockpiled firearms and screamed obscenity-laden mantras through a bullhorn into the wee hours of the morning. Frustrated neighbors pleaded with the authorities to do something, and on May 13, 1985, an army of city officials, firefighters, and police officers gathered outside the house to evict MOVE. The group refused to budge, and police fired tear gas canisters inside. A gun battle ensued, and at 5:30 that evening, a helicopter dropped a C4 bomb on the house. In the ensuing carnage, 61 houses burned to the ground and 11 people died, including 5 children. Although a host of emergency personnel stood by, nobody did anything to help. Yeah, absolutely horrible, guys. Well, after a massive backlash ensued, it was found out that the FBI had actually given the police force this C4, but there was no official record of them actually doing so. For the most part, this was just pushed under the rug and hardly anyone was punished. Whether they had any hand in telling emergency personnel to sit by and do nothing is anyone's guess, but it's been widely speculated upon ever since the tragedy happened. Number 5 on this list is the Paraguayan tape. So there really isn't any given name for this, but I'm calling it the Paraguayan tape because this footage was discovered in Paraguay several years ago. The footage only really surfaced a few years ago, but it was actually filmed way before that. This footage was taken back in 1994 by what looks to be some children. The clip itself is an amalgamation of a bunch of several second long clips that don't really make a cohesive narrative but are just super eerie. This, also coupled with the audio, makes this clip extremely scary. The audio is a bunch of screams and cries and weird noises that don't even sound human. Some people have chalked it up to being the poor recording equipment, but I really don't think so. Let's play you guys 30 seconds of this clip so you can get an idea what this thing is all about. So that's the first 30 seconds of the video, and as we can see, it's just super creepy. Also, at the end of the clip there, it looked like several teens were running to help one of their friends up off the ground. So either that friend tripped and fell, or was attacked by something, and it's tough to say. No one knows what happened to these kids who recorded this, or why they made it in the first place. Although I would wager a bet that something bad probably transpired. Everything that I've seen here looks like all the telltale signs of demonic intervention. Let's just hope that this clip wasn't actually the last documented video of these people alive. Number 4 on this list is Trump's hush payments. Donald Trump was accused of a lot of stuff during his rise to presidency, and these tapes would have proved a lot of it. Grunge says the Trump presidency has occasionally felt like a never-ending string of scandals, all being woven messily together by a drunk seamstress. But a small handful of threads keep emerging, one of the biggest of which is whether Trump paid off an adult model, Karen McDougal, to keep her from publicizing the fact that they'd had an affair. According to the New York Times, the FBI already knows the answer to this and has known since agents raided the offices of Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, in the summer of 2018. One of the goodies they netted in the raid was audio tapes of Trump discussing those underhand payments. If these tapes were held by the FBI for some time, then this is big news because this was obviously a really bad look for the president and would have fallen under some financial violations for sure. This also begs the question, how many other tapes of former presidents the FBI has had and held onto without showing the public? Number 3 on this list is Joseph James DeAngelo. Joseph James DeAngelo is a horrible serial killer who was only recently captured and incarcerated. Grunge says it wasn't until the 21st century that the Golden State Killer was given his notorious nickname. Before that, he'd been known as the original Night Stalker. But whether he was known to the public as one serial attacker or two, the Golden State Killer was infamous. From 1974 to 1985, police believe he murdered at least 13 people and assaulted at least 40 more. And he used technology to terrify his victims, calling up those he'd already assaulted to threaten them with worse. It's from one of these sadistic calls that the taunt tape emerges. Recorded by local police and handed over to the FBI, the audio tape was released onto the internet in 2016 as part of a renewed effort by law enforcement to catch the killer. To call it chilling would be a disservice to sub-zero temperatures. Over 34 awful seconds, the Golden State Killer breathes heavily into the phone, telling a previous victim he'll come back and kill her. It's not even the worst either. Another tape released by the FBI was an interview conducted in 1977 with the killer's first victim. It's a painful 5 minutes of hearing exactly how a monster goes about his work. Thanks to California's statute of limitations, it's also our only record of a crime he cannot be tried for. Sometimes Lady Justice is less blind than she is MIA. Now, I'm not gonna play any of these tapes for you guys because I honestly think they just get a little bit too real and I don't really want to go there. For a long time, the FBI, they kind of felt the same way. It was decades after the murders had actually taken place that they decided to release the actual tape that they had had. They must have had the tape the whole time and just thought it best not to show the public. This renewed effort to find the killer did actually pay off though, which is amazing to see. Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested in 2018 due to some DNA evidence that linked him to the crimes. He was 72 years old at the time, but eventually pled guilty to some of the crimes and was sentenced to life in in prison without any possibility of parole. Justice did finally come through, but it honestly took way too long and should have happened far earlier. Number 2 on this list is the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. If this is true, then this is a very disturbing reality, guys. Grunge says, prior to 9/11, the most significant date in World Trade Center history was February 26, 1993. That was the day Islamic fundamentalists exploded a gigantic car bomb underneath the Twin Towers, killing 6 people and injuring over 1,000 and causing millions of dollars of damage. The cell that carried out the attack turned out to contain a mere 7 people, one of whom was an FBI informant. During the lengthy investigation into the bombing, tapes made by the informant emerged which appeared to suggest that the FBI could have stopped the attack before it happened. At the time, the tapes were as embarrassing for the feds as pictures of J. Edgar Hoover wearing a pink tutu. Although the majority of the tapes were made after the WTC bombing, the informer can clearly be heard on them discussing with his handler how he'd previously purchased the timer for the WTC bomb as part of his undercover work using federal money. Although the attackers ultimately didn't use that specific timer, the mere fact that the FBI signed off on its purchase should have set off alarm bells from the J. Edgar Hoover building to Quantico. Perhaps even freakier, the tapes made after the bombing appear to show nothing but agents covering their asses for the attack and blaming their supervisors. So the FBI were literally purchasing parts to bombs to help these people pull off this bombing. Why didn't they step in and stop them? I understand that you want to do it at the right time to gain as much intel as possible, but clearly you can't let them go through with something like this. Like, obviously the intel is not worth the lives of any innocent people. Once again, guys, the FBI and agencies like that are supposed to have our backs and we are supposed to trust them. Stories like this really make me question that. And finally, number 1 on this list is Q042. Q042 is one of the most chilling tapes that has ever been recorded. Grunge says, on November 18th, 1978, paranoid cultist Jim Jones managed to talk nearly an entire American commune in Guyana into committing suicide by drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. The gigantic pile of over 900 bodies that resulted remains one of the largest peacetime massacres of US civilians behind only 9/11. If you've ever wondered how a single man, no matter how charismatic, managed to talk nearly 1,000 people into killing themselves and their children, wonder no more. Deep in the FBI vaults, a tape officially known as Q042 exists, but it has another name too, one more suited to its contents. Featuring the speech by Jones that preceded the People's Temple committing mass suicide, it's better known as the Death Tape. There is a transcript, and to call it heavy reading would be like saying war and peace is someone on the long side. What's scary about the transcript is how rational everyone seems to be. By the time we reach the end, people are openly crying even as they drink the poison that will kill them. I have never watched this tape personally, and I don't think I ever want to. The Jonestown Massacre is one of the most messed up things to ever happen in recent history, and watching it unfold on video is something I never want to do. Number 5 on this list is your fingerprints. Authorities having access to fingerprints and the whole development of using them to identify criminals in law enforcement, it really changed the entire policing game. Identifying people became a lot easier and gave you actually indisputable proof of what they had and hadn't touched. Now, most of us probably think about this whole fingerprint game and believe that it only applies to those who have already been incarcerated. They go to jail, and while they're in jail, a record of their fingerprints are taken down, so that if they ever do anything again or are in question of doing something, then we have a way of knowing for sure. However, it turns out that you don't actually need to be in jail for the FBI to be holding on to your prints. Buying a gun, getting a background check for a job, or even getting your driver's license are all locations where you may need to put your fingerprint down. Well, apparently this info isn't just thrown away, but it's actually sent to the massive FBI database holding all the prints. They have over 100 million fingerprints recorded at this database, and now you're part of it without even knowing it. Maybe I'm a little old school, but I feel like this is a bit of an invasion of privacy. Or at least it feels pretty backhanded considering I'm not even aware that that it's happening. Like, I suppose it would be one thing if they made it totally clear that your prints were going in there. I still wouldn't love that, but at least I'd know. By hiding it, it really feels super creepy and kind of slimy. I don't know, guys. Comment down below what you think about this. Should everybody have their prints collected or only people with criminal records? I'm curious to know. Number 4 on this list is Deep in the Woods. Back in 2006, there were 2 men who disappeared off the face of the earth. No one knew what happened to them or where they went. That picture got a lot clearer though when this video popped up. In 2007, a YouTube channel called LH posted this clip that was presumably filmed back in 2006. The video follows the exploits of these 2 young men in what the viewer is led to believe is their last moments on planet Earth. The 2 men start out by driving their car into the woods. They pass by a gate and then get to another one which they can't seem to open for some reason. They then get their flashlights and proceed into the darkness on foot. This is where it all goes to hell though. In the clip that I'm about to show you, we will see these 2 men walking through the woods and hear a loud animalistic noise. Then something will jump out at them, so fair warning. So as we can see, a creature lunged forward at the 2 men and got them running back to the car. Then the camera dropped and presumably this was the end of our 2 lads. If we kept playing that clip, then we would have seen one more thing, which is one of the men falling before the camera and then getting dragged off. So I think it's safe to say that these 2 guys didn't make it out of this battle unscathed. What they were doing there, what this thing was, and what ultimately happened to them is all unknown though. For all we know, they got dragged back to this thing's lair and they could still be there today. Number 3 on this list is The Possession. This next clip is from 2 decades ago in Portugal. The YouTuber Chills has actually covered this video before and even he is pretty terrified of it. The video was filmed on an old camcorder back in 2001. The quality is pretty atrocious, which can be expected from an old camera. The video is centered around several young boys hanging out. It starts off with them just innocently playing, but then they end up doing something they really shouldn't have. They try to contact the dead. As we've seen time and time again, regardless of how you attempt to do this, it usually turns out pretty bad. And that's pretty much what happens here with these boys. In the clip that I'm about to show you, one of the boys gets possessed by some type of demon and falls to the ground convulsing.
Então, ai caraças, destino.
Nem ficou estilo, nem ficou
Merda,
estilo.
foste não lá, opa, a sério, não lá.
Olha, ficou estilo, olha, ficou estilo.
Como foste
Espera aí,
fazer
André.
com cara.
Espera aí, olha aí.
Mas deve estar gozado, meu Deus.
Opa, calma, Steve, opa, não brinques tu também, meu.
Deve estar gozado, meu Deus.
Mas eu, meu,
Sou Steve.
ainda mais gajo não sabe.
Opa, calma-se mesmo, mas sou Steve.
Estou estilo.
Mas,
Já, pá, isto mete um
opa, não, eu não meto só.
outro. Mete um gozo do caralho.
Sou Steve.
Eventually the boy gets up and he's no longer himself. His voice is not his own and the words he's saying are not the ones that he would normally say. It's clear that he's been possessed by some type of demon. Now this video of theirs is almost 40 minutes long and that possession took place at the 5-minute mark. After he gets possessed, he runs out of the home and the lights turn off. The kids are obviously super frightened and don't know what's going on. What ultimately happened to this guy and the demon that possessed him, we may never know for sure. Number 2 on this list is The Masked Man. This is really chilling stuff and was apparently released by the police in an attempt to find the people involved. Once again, we have a clip centered around 2 boys and once again, they go missing. This time though it happens in 2005 in Croatia and we also get a far better view of the man responsible for the disappearances in this one as well. The clip starts out innocently enough with 2 lads just messing around in the park. At one point though, they see a dark figure in the distance. At this time though, they aren't on high alert and don't think much of it. Fast forward a bit though and he starts to approach them.
Dobro, daj joj. Nemam pojma, daj ga šutni, ja ne znaš. Daj ga šutni.
Neću se. Mislim da je pijan, nešto.
Okej, mislim da idemo. A on mi odavde.
Dođi se, ti mu vidio facu, snima ga, snima ga.
Pa naravno da sam vidio facu, vidiš.
Nisam skužio, čekaj, kaj je bilo?
So at first, they didn't think it was anything, but then the creepy man came after them. This isn't the end of the story though, as the clip continues. The guys are now in a different area recapping what just happened. Soon afterwards though, the man shows up again, and now the gents are starting to really get concerned. They run away and get to an apartment building. This is where we believe the disappearance actually occurs.
Creepy. Koji kat?
Peti kat.
Just for a split second we saw him. The man with the mask right in the elevator waiting for the guys. No one knows what happened to these guys and who that masked man was. All we have is this tape and a very sad and scary story. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Paris Catacombs. The Paris Catacombs is one of the creepiest collection of tunnels in the entire world. They were built many years ago and have thousands of dead remains from people back in the day. Many people over the years have speculated on them being extremely haunted, and video footage like this definitely helps add fuel to that fire. The following footage was found on a video recorder deep in the catacombs several years ago.
It's very bizarre. These arrows point in a direction. Occasionally also, he stops to photograph roomfuls of bones, which means that he's very deep inside the catacombs. So basically, he's filming what he's seeing very deep inside the catacombs, other than the point of view shots or pictures of human bones. The catacombs for centuries.
So my dude is deep inside the catacombs, as the narrator of that clip says. All of a sudden though, things start going wrong.
Decide which way to run among all the many different corridors. He's running faster and faster and faster, deeper and deeper into the catacombs. And all of a sudden,
now we don't actually know why he started running, but he just did. Clearly something was chasing him that we can't see on the camera. This is truly all we know though. What was after him and if he managed to survive, that's anyone's guess.